Hello, and in June, so it's already June, we're going to be talking about incident response planning. For those of you who have one in place, awesome. For those of you who don't fear, we've got some templates headed your way. More importantly today, though, we're going to focus a bit on incident response planning for and with your clients or customers. That it's great that you have one. You need to be taking that to the next level. And I have three awesome panelists on today to talk about what they're doing in their businesses with their own and with their clients. So in true round robin fashion here, we're going to get started with some intros. Rob, will you kick us off today?
Sure. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. It's Rob at Cloud9 Computing Group. We're in Lake Mary, Florida, so just north of Orlando. Central Florida is our market area. I guess minor origin story, right? Can I go there? We started as a traditional trunk slammer guy in the early days, right? Visiting sites, built up into an MSP about I guess we started that 13 years ago, and just like the rest of you, we're growing and learning every day. So happy to be here.
Perfect. And you were a repeat guest, so thank you for coming back.
Thanks for having me.
Bill.
Yes, excited to be here today, be part of this with a couple of great companies and a great solution provider in Huntress. So my name is Bill Lopez. I am the Chief Revenue Officer for Strategic Solutions. We are a new charter technologies company. Little background on me. We started, my business partner and I started the company 24 years ago, kind of fell into healthcare, primarily because I have a wife that's a nurse, and my business partner had been a lifelong EMS volunteer. So we had some really high level experience in healthcare, and we've been digging in there ever since. So security, obviously a huge part of what we do for our client base, and incident response planning. I'm really excited about the topic to share what we know and learn more as I listen to my peers here on this format today. So really pumped about that. I think it's going to be a really good session.
Perfect. And thank you for joining for your first time on the Fireside Chat. Hopefully
pleasure.
Not your last.
Yep. No.
And Jeff, last but not least.
Hi, Jeff Mertz. I'm with SafetyNet. We're an MSP in Northern Michigan and the Detroit area. I've been in IT 25 years. Started off as a help desk computer tech for some Fortune 500 enterprise companies. Fortune 100, actually. GM and Eaton Corporation, pretty big places. Wife wanted to move back up North Michigan, so ended up at SafetyNet. Been here 17 years now, just over. Went from building a help desk to being a security engineer, network engineer, senior security engineer, certified ethical hacker, all the technical certs, Cisco, all that, Microsoft. I helped build the company from 5 people to we're at 41 or 42 right now.
Wow.
I run our help desk now, but I still do a security incidents on a basis. Have to provide my insight, years of doing security and years of working with clients. I love educating people, so it's fun to do these things. So.
Perfect. So we've done some intros now. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Becky Teal. I head up our community efforts here at Huntress, which means I get to do the Fireside Chats every month and talk about business topics versus technical topics. And on that note, so we did a pre-call. We got into some really deep conversation on that pre-call talking about some of this. So we're going to try and revisit some of that and maybe address some new as well. In this platform, there's the chat function, everyone. All those go public. There's also a Q&A section. If you put a chat comment in that should really be in Q&A so that we don't miss it, I will move it over. I'm not deleting your comments. It's that they move over to the Q&A so that we have a board to revisit them a little bit easier than trying to dig back through amazing concert conversations to find the things that you want answered by this group. So we talked a bit about what to consider when you're building an IR plan. Say you're building it for the first time or revisiting it, renewing it, whatever that may be. We talked about maybe what vertical considerations might need to be included and what to do when it comes to like the cyber insurance conversations and pieces like that. Where do you guys go with that, especially thinking, vertical insurance considerations on amendments to your existing IR plan?
I'll go.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And I'll hand it to, I think verticals is really a great place to start because it's hard to sell snow to Eskimos, right? Like if people don't have a perceived need, it's really hard to start there. And I guess what I'm saying with that is you're going to have an easier time explaining or having buy-in on concepts like incident response plans and actual care about security based on the vertical of your customer. So, it comes down to maybe start it with the people who are an easy sell and get better at it so that as you go to your other verticals, you can take that knowledge and kind of what you've learned and help them in their journey of explaining value.
I think in our case, Becky, we've, because, I'll speak to healthcare, acutely focused there for, like I said, 24 years. In most recent years, probably the last 5 or 6 years, we've taken more of a consultative approach with our client base, really educational. And, it's like Rob said, you start with the ones that are open to the conversation, work your way up that way. But the reality is that in at least in healthcare, there is this confusion around DR planning versus incident response planning, 2 different things. And as more and more, I think what's helping is more and more breaches that are occurring in that specific industry is starting to kind of get people more conscious about what could happen. And the fact that most businesses that encounter an event like this don't recover. It used to be around prevention. The conversations used to be really, and they still are around prevention, but now the conversation is, it's not a matter of if, it's when it happens, and when it happens, how do you recover? So when you start having those types of engagements, those types of conversations, at least that's what we're seeing. It's just being open, authentic, awkward, not beating around the bush, more around programming and preparation than it is around just a specific solution that might prevent something from happening. I think that's really what's happening. And you got to start with a group that is willing to listen. And then you can leverage that group that was willing to listen as a third party story for the ones that are more difficult. And then because leaders, decision makers want to hear more about what their peers are doing rather than what you think they should be doing. So that's kind of an approach we're taking, at least in healthcare, and it seems to be working.
We're pretty horizontal, not vertical. But where we started, where we had a few compliance clients that required some higher end stuff, we've been SOC 2 for quite a long time. So obviously we kind of take our own medicine in that regard. But we took a lot of lessons we learned internally when we started approaching our compliance clients on the things they need to do. The challenge is that higher security actually involves the hits to productivity. Bringing all that in and then providing the value, like Bill said, is being a partner and not just hey, fix my stuff, but being a partner in planning, in preparation. The good old phrase, like, poor planning prevents poor performance, or prior planning prevents piss poor performance. And an IR plan is all about that. And it is not if, it is when. And where 10 years ago when I really started in the security, 12 years ago when I started in the security space here with SafetyNet, it was always like, it was 85% of businesses that had any incident went out of business within 12 months, generally within 6. Now we're seeing a lot more ability to recover between people knowing about it, there being less stigma with companies being hit with something happening and not losing as much trust depending on compliance and what got hit. You're able to provide that value as that partner to be like, hey, we work with this company, we helped them recover. We were brought in when this company had a problem. Providing that value and showing that it's not just about spending more money on security, it's about proactively preparing for something.
We use the saying, Jeff, very similar. Was it failing to plan is planning to fail? And yep. It's another version, but it is it is convincing, not convincing, but giving the data enough information to the decision maker to recognize this could happen to them and what their game plan is if it does.
So I just put a poll up on if you've had to use your IR plan in the last 12 months. It's a very long amount of time. So I'm sure that you have had time. So on our prep call, we talked a bit about that incident doesn't necessarily mean the sky is falling into the world. Incident's a very broad scope definition there of pretty much anything can fall into an incident. What are some times where you've had to use that plan, that having a plan kind of saved the day for you?
I can start real quick. Not for us. Thankfully, we haven't had anything internally where we've had to use our own internal plan. We had a client where they signed the contract and we were about to go live. And we were going live on a Monday. The Friday before they went live, their exchange got popped with the exchange hack from a couple years ago. And their site got cryptoed through exchange. And we came in that Monday and we're like, they tried to do it internally and brought us in. But we used pieces of our plan to help them on where we immediately saw what was going on. We prevented them from making any further changes and then started going through the broad steps of our own plan as if it was us to help cover them. We knew what to do. We knew when to call insurance. We knew when to call forensics because we had already laid that out in our own plan. So, that was a really big help to have that knowledge ahead of time and not have to be like, oh, well, what do? We don't know. Kind of already had it laid out for us. And presenting that plan to them allowed us to convince them to finally get insurance involved 4 days later than we would have liked, but we were able to get them recovered within a week after that. So, it was a big deal.
Becky, for us, we use our IR plan in different ways. Some of our clients, some of the mid-sized healthcare clients we have, don't really have don't have an incident response plan. They have DR plans and they have what I would call an IR plan light, if I would even be that kind. So we use ours a lot at different levels. So let me give a case in point. This is a true story, happened last week. We actually got an alert from Huntress. It's a Huntress SOC alert that detected that one of our clients, and a physician, had launched a VPN client that had not been used in months, and it recognized that as abnormal behavior, and it suspended his access to systems. And we got the alerts. Once that happens, our incident response manager reaches out to leadership, follows their process, reaches out to leadership for the medical. It's a large medical practice, and OBGYN practice reached out to our designated points of contact. So they were aware, worked with the physician. Our forensic team would then work with the physician, confirm, did you actually do this, etc. And what we had found was he uses a specific VPN when he's out on vacation. He had not used it in months, which would be why he hadn't used it. But the system did its job. We then downgraded it from an issue down to a benign, just to close the ticket out as benign issue. But that's how we will leverage our IR plan for a situation like that, or even a business email compromise. We'll leverage our IR plan for that as well. It doesn't always have to be used for these enormous situations where a system's down and ransomware and things like that. So what I'm saying is the IR plan can be like it can be part of your culture and how you handle those types of incidents throughout the day.
I'd love to add to what Bill said, but he's just got to get out of my head over here. I think the only thing I would say is, it's not always a security thing. Like incident response can just be about third party going down. That is an incident. Just Office 365 went down again. Like, thank God that's happening a lot less, but it's happened, right? And then you get an influx of phone calls and stuff. So like just having like one of our incident response things is if a service goes down, we have a status page to update and some webhooks that can go in there to facilitate that, right? But it's not always a security incident either. And I think that was a big lesson we learned. We brought on somebody who was from the insurance world on our staff, and it really kind of changed our perspective because as IT people, I think we're just so mentally ingrained in being like reactive to these type of things that just actually thinking ahead of, well, what can you generally do that can deal with an incident of any kind? It was really a maturity for us operationally. So it's just another point.
I have to believe that having some consistency then in how you handle incidents of all size helps with account management. As you have people move roles, those customers don't feel like they might have gotten better service from their old account manager versus the new one. So it gives you some continuity of business service and just business process as a process-driven industry, it gives you just a slight way to make sure that stays consistent.
It keeps it very sticky. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that the trust level goes up. That situation right there where, our technical account manager reached out in the incident management role to follow the process, it just bolsters their confidence in us as their managed service provider, their partner. And in fact, the second part of that conversation was it led to, hey, let's, we're actually scheduling a meeting in 2 weeks. We have a lunch in 2 weeks with the client because he wants to increase his security posture just based on how this went, how well it went. He wants to make more investment in a security posture more with a SIM solution. But my point is, those types of, you're nailing it, Becky. Those types of, when those things happen, you've got a process in place, and they see the value you're bringing to the table. So the value, they're willing, they're going to make more investments, and the relationship is going to stay intact much longer than if you don't do those things.
I think that's a great point, Bill. I would actually say too, like, we should be better at our industry in making sure we do reach out. And that's like another side of camming. It's like, hey, I don't just have to set an appointment with you. I want other members of your staff to know that we're looking out for you. Something happened, we're aware of it, but that's a great way to prove value, right? It's not just, hey, I'm doing a ticket or working on a project.
I think even on the other side of it, for any industry, not even IT, it's that situation where you're in that habit, you have that culture of planning ahead. Some of our incident stuff I don't really think about as being incident response, but 365 goes down, our remote systems go down, Teams phones, I'm sure we've never had issues with those. We have backup plans that are already in place, and our IR plan has very low severity things. What do? Well, we use our chat system to get with clients instead of using the phones. We send out an email blast. We update our webpage to show, Teams phones are down. Please use this link to send a ticket. But you can do that across any industry. Our manufacturers can do the same thing for, our sales page is down. Please contact your sales rep directly at this phone number. Just having those little things in place ahead of time for low severity incidents is a sign of business maturity. You can take something where you're trying to prevent risk and apply it to general daily procedures and policies. So it's a very good point.
And I love that you've created kind of a known thing for your customers. Then they know where to go to find information, that over time, if they know where to seek that out instead of calling you first. There's nothing wrong with calling you first, but people would, in some instances, rather self-serve. And so if they know where to go to find information from you and how you communicate, it creates less panic when things go awry, because they know they're going to hear from you soon, and here's how that'll happen. So one thing we talked about, and then we'll move into the next phase here, but one of my favorite questions to ask MSPs in group settings is, so you have an IR plan, where does it live and who has access to it? The where does it live is a personal favorite, because it's like, so you can't get into your system and it's on your system. If your contacts go down in your phone, I think of it when I moved roles years ago, I lost all of my contacts. They were all tied to my old Outlook account. So the minute I lost access to that, I had no phone numbers from anybody that I needed. So when you have situations like that, where does your plan live? And then who has access to that plan inside your organization?
I'll start again, I guess. Because we do a quarterly review of the IR plan, and we do a yearly tabletop. Please look up the term tabletop if you don't use it. It's a way to practice and make sure everyone's ready to go. But the incident response team, which is different than the security team, because it's not always security people that need to be involved. We all have a copy of it printed out at our homes and then in a personal digital storage location. And then we treat it as a company asset, confidential company asset. We did have a person leave that was on that team. And we made sure to, during the offboarding meeting, thankfully it was a gracious one. He had just found another opportunity that we grow his career. We're like, hey, can you show us delete that? He's like, yep, deleted it. He turned in the paper one from home so we could shred it. Obviously it has account numbers and, for our internet providers and account numbers for our insurance. We don't have passwords on it. That's stored in a bank vault. And then the owners can get in if we need recovery passwords. But we store it off our site. And part of our tabletop is, can you guys access that document right now when we go into it, right? Where's your document? Do you know where it is? Can you access it? And if we can't, we immediately fill the tabletop and we got to start over. So, it is important to have access to that outside of your normal day-to-day access.
Jeff, your point actually made me think of something. First off, I learned from my prep call with Bill and Jeff, a couple, I think, sanitation things we could do better, but in just terms of being more diligent about, where we duplicate our plan and how we deal with recording that. Some of the things that scare me, like IT glue or Hoodoo, like never goes down for anybody, right? Like, how do you deal with, those situations too? It's like, what's better to have a redundant system, and then do you still, like, how far in depth do you go to? You made me think about, start somewhere, don't have it all perfectly figured out, right? Do your steps and then do your tabletops to figure out the gaps, and then could be quarterly or biannually objectives to add to how much you've got in your IR plan, right?
A simple list of, oh shoot, here's who we call if everything's on fire, is a better place than not having that.
One of the things we make sure of is we're careful how much secret sauce to put in our IR plans, because the threat actors can get your game plan. And so, we have it very similar to what Jeff's tech methods are, which is off-site in different personal file shares, things like that, encrypted as well. But we're also really careful, like the secret sauce, everybody just knows. So we leave out some of that just to prevent them from getting access to the game plan, to take advantage of it.
That's so. I like that. That makes sense. And then it's I had an interesting conversation with the team at Fifth Wall Solutions recently, who do cyber insurance, on where people keep their cyber plans, and to encourage. And we actually put it in the handout for today, that your cyber liability policy probably shouldn't be stored on your network. Like, don't keep a copy of it. The Fifth Wall guy was also very much like just print it out and then delete everything. He's like, stop keeping copies of that where people can find it.
If the bad guys know how much your coverage is for, the bad guys are going to ask for that much in ransom.
Yep. And that hasn't gone away.
And perfectly not sponsoring anybody, but the guys at Fifth Wall are great. Talk to them. If they can't help you, they will point you in the right direction. They rather see people getting help than make money half the time. So they're a great group to work with for anyone on the chat.
In Q&A, we even had a question about how to convince your clients to pay for the increasingly expensive. Rob will come back. This happens sometimes. Increasingly expensive cyber policies. The team at Fifth Wall absolutely has some conversation points for you to help with that. Like, they're fantastic human beings. They also join me quarterly, so they'll be next month's guest for Fireside Chat. They join every quarter to do some office hours just to answer questions. So pivoting now, I'm going to put up another poll here, because now we're going to move on to IR plans with and for your clients. So we're just going to assume that everyone here either has a plan, or following this, they're going to go make a plan. We're going to talk about doing it with your clients now too, and making sure that they have plans. So we put a poll up there on, do you have IR plans with each of your clients? So we talked some about the paradigm and liability shift that is happening when it comes to incident response and disaster recovery with your clients. Bill, I believe that was your term, the paradigm shift?
Yes. Yeah. So, it's funny in healthcare, we have a process at New Charter, developed process called Blue Sky, which is basically an executive engagement we do with our clients, the leadership level, on all aspects of their business. And one of the components we talk about is cybersecurity, cyber liability. The cyber liability piece is interesting because in healthcare, many times they believe they're covered because they pay for these extra riders on their med malpractice, which is like $50,000 per physician. And we all know that, if you've got, a few $100,000 in liability, there is going to go really fast in the event of some sort of catastrophe. So it is having the conversation with them to understand that they need cyber liability. And our recommendation is no less than $1 million worth of coverage. We like to see them closer to 2 or 3, although it is getting harder and harder to get that level of coverage unless you can demonstrate a strong security posture. And so that is where security incident response planning comes into play. It's where the annual HIPAA risk assessment comes into play. Having a strong cyber posture up and down, meeting specific compliance requirements, regardless if you're in healthcare or banking or what industry you're in. So it's kind of what we've been doing is we've been having more success with, on the business side of the house, recommending, hey, you need to look at having a cyber liability policy, and then working from there backwards, which is helping them. And one of the things we talked about the other day on the prep call with Rob and Jeff was operational maturity. Having these conversations is also another way, whether you're doing QBRs or blue skies or whatever you call them, is helping your client mature. More mature businesses, better security posture businesses are going to be more profitable. They're going to perform better. So that's a lot. That's a high level, but those were some of the key things we discussed the other day on our prep call.
I think you go back to the RPO, RTO conversation, the same way that our industry really kind of learned how to sell backup and get kind of very confident in that. And you just apply the same thing. You go, look, hear me out here. I mean, do you think there might possibly be an incident? Would you like that to be more impactful or less impactful? It's the same thing you're doing when you have the backup conversation. You're just changing where you assign the source of pain. So, I think it does come down to dollars, and it's our job to educate them as to how that ROI actually works. And like you said, they don't know because they just don't think the same way because they don't deal with the breadth and the amount of occurrences, right? I mean, completely different world. So I think that's where turning it into a business conversation where you talk about impact makes the value of prevention and threat hunting ongoing so much more compulsory.
That's a good point. I don't even know that I brought this up in our prep, Rob, it's about the impact. I've had these conversations a lot as a senior security engineer when I'm brought in with the account management team to talk about this stuff. And one of the things that have really struck decision makers is when we've worked with clients to have an IR plan with proper security footing, we are normally able to get them back up and running within 2 to 3 days, because we're catching it on time, we're reporting it on time, we're able to then turn around and do our recoveries on time. Where we're coming in, like my example at the beginning of the chat, like took 4 days to get them to call their insurance, almost 5 days, 4.5, 5 days to get them to call their insurance, and then it was another week. They were down almost 2 weeks. Like they were kind of working, but your sales guys aren't selling, your your engineers aren't accessing files, people are remaking work on their home machines. You're not productive, you're losing money every hour you're down. So that's the conversation, is your IR plan takes a 2-week down into a 4-day down. How much money does that save you in the long run? Because we're not looking at if it happens, we're looking at the next 5 years when it happens. What a security guy, right? This all the blinky boxes in the world doesn't prevent someone from clicking on the wrong thing in their email. We do what we can, but something eventually will happen. So let's get that turnaround time from 2 weeks to 4 days.
I don't want to cap on something. You say you're not a sales guy, but you actually, it's funny, as a security guy, you didn't want to mention, hey, you've got to do this to fill a compliance box, or there's these penalties if you don't report in time, right? We've tried that, and it's that carrot and stick. Like the stick doesn't work for some reason at all. Like it's like, yeah, whatever.
Now, another part of the talk track we use is with accountability. And so, with mid-sized, even larger medical practices, there's still this, I don't know what you call it. It's this belief that we're not a target, right? We're just too small, and no matter what you say, to your point, Rob, you can talk about, hey, they actually want the smaller medical practice because they know that you're not making the same investments that a large health system is, this, that, and the other. But they still believe that, every day that goes by that nothing happens, they're geniuses. So it's a very delicate conversation to have without using the carrot and the stick. But so when you start talking about accountability, and we've seen cases like this in the industry, we've never personally experienced it, but we've seen cases where decision makers are being held accountable, legally for not making a decision. And in some cases, it's patients that are actually litigating. Some cases, it's the physicians where they've lost a practice or they couldn't recover. And the analogy I like to use is that when I speak to a decision maker and they start saying, well, it's your responsibility to secure us. It's like, it is. It's our responsibility to advise you. You decide whether you want to be secure or not. We can't make you. So, we have those types of conversations. But even before I go there, it's like, listen, if to take this out of a healthcare discussion for a second, if you have your taxes done by an accountant that does a great job of getting you incredible, reducing your tax liability, and you get audited because they've taken some liberties to maybe not do it straight and narrow, he's or she, they're not accountable, you are. And so when you are leveraging your MSP to be your trusted advisor, they're giving you the right advice. And if you don't take their advice, you can't point back that direction because ultimately you made the decision. So that's kind of a carrot and stick kind of thing, but it's more of a business discussion, I think, than, ooh, you're going to get breached. It's more about accountability and ownership. We're all owning this problem together. It's not just your MSP. So, when the reason I say this is because a lot of times in healthcare, they'll say, I think you brought it up, Jeff, how many days, with an IR plan, you can be back up in 2 or 3 days versus 2 or 3 weeks. And I can tell you how many times I've heard a decision maker for a mid-sized medical practice go, oh, we'll just go to paper. We'll be okay. It's like, well,
okay, you won't.
No, you won't. You say that, but you won't. And so because they're just reacting to your point, Becky. They're not thinking that way yet. And we have to have those business talk tracks to everything we're mentioning here to get them to come to those realizations on their own without trying, because you're not going to compel or convince anyone to do anything. They have to see what you're understand what you're saying, and then embrace it, and then meet you halfway.
I want a quick sidebar on the accountability piece. As we advise people, we need to make sure that those insurance questionnaires, your account managers, your technical providers, we don't sign those. That's theirs, right?
Yep.
Their insurance attestations, they're the ones signing it. All you can do is say, I believe you cover this, and if it's on them whether or not they are accepting that risk. We also do declinations. If people choose not to back up their Office 365 with a third-party, backup solution. Oh, well, Microsoft backs up my stuff. No, they don't. Like, I can I'm a security guy. I can write a PowerShell script in about 5 minutes that'll delete all your backups and encrypt everything in your Office 365. All I need is someone to click on something, right? You need to have that backed up. So here's your declination. We take no responsibility if something happens. When you start providing those, you're giving the accountability, the onus then is on them. They're like, whoa, I just signed something that says I'm responsible for something. It's going to make them start thinking that this is a serious deal. And then also never, ever let your AMs say yes, no on those insurance forms. You can sit down and have a conversation and be like, do you two-factor everything? No, you don't. But we have two-factor on email, and we have two-factor on our PCs. You have two-factor on your phone? You don't two-factor everything. All we can do is advise and guide, and having those conversations about that accountability, that you're the one signing the insurance, you're the one, accepting these risks. All we can do is the best we can, and we will never say, oh, you're secure because you have XYZ security stuff. We're like, you're more secured be careful, do your training, all that stuff. So
Jeff, we take those.
Rabbit
I didn't get. I didn't get that detailed, but our declinations are baked into our proposal. So they actually click electronically. They acknowledge they are not taking this advice. Blah 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 blah. So
that's perfect.
That way, there's a there's an electronic trail for that. But we do that as well.
And one other thing too, I think because this is one of the things that Becky and I talked about last time we were face to face is any IR plan you advise your clients on, make sure they're not too specific. If they don't follow a step on that plan, your insurance will not cover them. Make sure your internal IR plans are generic enough that if you don't do a step, they're not going to decline your insurance for you, the MSP, either. Because lo and behold, when something does eventually happen, you need to be able to follow every single one of those steps. And if your IR plan says pull logs from XYZ server that hasn't been around for 5 years and you can't do that step, your insurance will be like, sorry, you didn't do what you're supposed to, we're out. And I've seen it with clients. Yeah, not a good thing.
Well, that's great. You nailed it, man. I don't want to rabbit trail too hard because poor Becky's going to have to rope us in.
This is perfect.
But I want to go back to what Bill and Jeff were also kind of tangentially going on. And that's, you have to have the conversation. You don't have to sell it right away. Like, it's kind of like salting the tip jar from a musician. So, back in the broke musician days, you salt the tip jar in hopes that some poor schlep will feel bad enough for you to put $5 in there. And really, you're kind of doing the same thing with the conversation, right? They'll see one of their friends or hear of somebody else in their industry who's around the area that got whacked. And all of a sudden, that little seed you planted in the back of their mind about, we have a thing that can help with that becomes a lot more like, wait a minute, I remember that conversation with Bill. I didn't, it's
The Change Healthcare recent event obviously was a great story in healthcare, and a lot of third-party stories. To your point, Rob, we use a lot of third-party stories versus us saying it's like, hey, we know of this practice that happened. And being part of New Charter Technologies, we've got partners across the country that are telling stories all the time. We get to hear this, so it's not just hearing it. It's strategic. I'm hearing it from partners in other parts, other states. So the third-party story is very powerful, and then events, national events like a Change Healthcare issued event that occurred most recently, and that destroyed a lot of practices because they were not, again, tangent here. Sorry, Becky. The security incident response plans aren't only for your client or for you. It is also for your client's ecosystem. If they haven't planned appropriately for the other organizations that they rely heavily on that could have a security event, if they haven't vetted them appropriately for their preparedness for a security event, they are really taking a risk. And with a company like Change Healthcare, which handles revenue cycle management, that's how they get paid. And there are many practices that weren't paid for weeks upon weeks. And we heard stories of physicians taking out personal loans, things like that to keep cash flow going. Ultimately, many practices are gone. They did not recover. And it wasn't about anything they did wrong in their own environment. It had everything to do with a third party.
Well, you just opened up the third-party risks conversation. That's a whole nother.
That's a whole nother. Well, we might circle back to that one. No,
that's another 2-hour fireside chat.
Yeah, I had to mention that just because it's well beyond just the client, what our clients are doing and what we're doing, and so I just had to bring that point up for another day.
Yeah, no, I feel like that one needs to come with some ibuprofen for the muscle soreness that comes when you have to clench your jaw for that long to talk about those topics. So we have a couple of conversations going on in the chat here that it's ones that tie in then to insurance and now your your IR plan of filling it out for your client, with your client, or just letting them do it on their own. So I have a strong opinion on letting them do it on their own. I don't usually voice opinions on this, but I'm going to today. On specifically your insurance plan, if they're filling it out on their own without consulting you, they might be checking boxes thinking you do things that you're not doing. And if you're not talking to them about, if you're avoiding these conversations, your competitors are very willing to talk to your clients about these things.
worst thing you can do is let them do it on their own and have them say yes to something they don't have because they just don't understand the technology. While you can't fill it out, you can be like, no, you don't do that. No, you don't do that. No, you don't do that. Well, we thought you were doing all of our security, and be like, here's our list of stuff and here's how it combines. We actually just are rolling out a new process for, and going back to all our existing clients and for all our new clients, where we align our security stack with how it meets the average of security questionnaires over the last 6 months that we've gotten from our clients. So we can say, you meet these requirements, right? Do you two-factor all the things? No. But what you do is then you fill out, I two-factor email, I two-factor PCs, I two-factor firewalls, do not two-factor switches. They're internal, and they, they're only available at, via SSH or console. So you can put in then how you almost meet the requirements, right? You can fill out a blank page on those forms. Don't let your clients think they can't. But sieges, it's we've seen people give our forms back and they go, we need answers to these 3 questions. And I'm like, why don't you sign me the whole form? And I'm like, nope. They're like, really?
You turn it into a cam conversation. I mean, hey, let's hop on the phone together. Let's go over it. And then you're in that advisor role. And then we tell them, hey, we provide guidance. So, I mean, we started emailing out in February because we all know everybody waits till mid-March and early April, right? Start filling those things out, and then you get all the million inbox requests about the cyber questionnaires. And I'll tell you, it really helps to say, hey, we're there to provide guidance. We're not going to fill it out for you, but we're going to help you make sure that you put stuff on there. Jeff is dead on. I mean, somebody said the head scratchers. It's like, go with no on that one because it's not an absolute. You don't want to get hung. And you get to explain that to customers. You go, you do this on 85-90% of things, the MFA or whatever, like you were talking about, but I don't want you to get denied in a claim, which is what is probably the question behind the question here, just because you filled this out with an absolute. And that's where that's more than just answering the question for them. That's advising to also start thinking about, how does this whole claim process actually work and where can I get in trouble?
And fill out a page with notes. The insurance company will take that note page, and your insurance claim agent can then go back to their fiduciary and be like, hey, look, these are the 3 things that aren't MFA'd in their network. Or they don't have a SIEM, but they're a 15-person manufacturer. They don't need a SIEM. It's okay. And you can get those rates better.
I love Rob's comment about converting the form to a spreadsheet with notes and responsible parties, progress reports, working with clients on that spreadsheet. It gives you a conversation point, a thing to revisit. Yeah, there's Rosie. Those of you who haven't met her yet, that's Rosie.
Hey, Rosie.
She likes to periodically come in, and she only has one eye. She's not giving dirty looks. She's just got one eye. And she tends to look very angry in the background.
She's perfect the way she is.
She is perfect, only mildly judgy. So it's, having that and using that as a conversation to keep that moving. There are different things that you can add that do help with those insurance rates, that make a difference. And IR plans are, if they're not one of them, they are quickly becoming one of them, that you will start seeing more and more on cyber insurance policies that are a necessary thing. We did have a question, and I would just want to cover it in this too. Bill, you answered it, but I want to make sure that we talk about it here too. Does your internal incident response plan serve as a starting point for your client-specific IRPs? Do you have the things in your internal that are also very closely mirrored to your client-specific?
My answer on that on the chat was yes. I think if you don't have one, you need to become a subject matter expert on that. It's really difficult to advise your client if you haven't built your own, and you're spending the time to really make sure your IR plan is effective. So, and tested, and tabletop exercises, and all these things. So you have to become a subject matter expert on that if you're going to advise your client on how to create on helping them build their own and making sure they're doing all the things they should be doing for their own security incident response plan. So that's my thoughts on the matter.
For us, it's yes and no. Being so horizontal, northern Michigan, Detroit area, it's hard to target vertical sometimes. But it's we're SOC 2 compliant, right? Where we work with CMMC, we work with CGIS, we work with HIPAA, we work with PCI, we work with all the different compliance stuff. But then we go into other places where, like we said, like 15-person manufacturer, they make, cabinets for luxury homes. It's like, yeah, you don't need to have a, 17-page incident response plan. But I think the bones are the same. Here's the stuff you need, right? Here's when you need to initiate it. Here's the list of vendors. Here's the list of critical components. Those things are all going to be the same. So in that regards, we do use ours as a template. It may just not have the same, Sev 1, 2, 3, 4, or maybe it's just one severity for them, and here's the list of people you call.
I think too, it's probably helpful for a lot of people that haven't done an IR plan to like really understand kind of how flexible you can be. In other words, like ours is really about who's the subject matter expert, who's the one that's the central point of contact. How often will that person be the central point of contact for the first 24 and 48 hours? Who determines what the cadence is of the contact from that point forward, right? These aren't even, I haven't gotten into a technical process yet. We're just talking about how do we centralize communication and check up, right? So I think it's, you can get those are going to be common across every incident. So I think the key there is starting somewhere, assigning a subject matter expert, assigning a central point of contact, right? You got to have something to go to that's a starting point to at least gain control of the communication. Yeah. And, don't make it too technical. It doesn't need to be technical.
Not technical at all.
Yeah. And I think that's where we get chopped up is that it's really an operational thing, not a technical thing. And it's kind of, again, it forces your customer and your relationship operational maturity levels, Bill likes to say, to really position it where it's not talking about the IT. It's really talking about business process.
Yeah, Rob, it comes back to, I agree with that. It comes back to roles and responsibilities. It's like the equivalent of we're all going to take the field and play a baseball game. Well, if everybody's trying to play shortstop, we got a problem. So, so in this case, and I'm thinking as you listening to both of you, this could be different. And when I read the question, I was first reading it as you don't have an IR incident response plan, your client doesn't, so it's important to have your own and be an expert there. That's kind of how I was reading that question. But as far as being the starting point, it depends. Are they a co-managed client with, a mature internal IT team that has an incident response plan? They might start it off. They might have the responsibility and the role where they've got the ball first, and then they notify the MSP. It really kind of depends on the mix and what the dynamic is. If it's a client that has if it's fully managed services client, then the reality is, in my book, you're going to be the starting point for anything that happens in their environment. It's not going to be them. But I think, co-managed is another curveball, because if you've got, an internal IT team that is robust and, strong skills, et cetera, they may be the ones that kick the ball off.
The top level of our IR plan is who's the incident response manager, and she's a former engineer, but she's not a engineer anymore. She's a director, right? She just knows the policies and processes because she fills out our internal security stuff. So she knows when to call the security team in. She knows when to call the insurance. She knows when to get the owner involved or when to leave the owner out of it. Oh, somebody left their laptop at a hotel. The owner doesn't need to know. He doesn't care. We just need to make sure that we document it, we log it, and we flag all our systems to wipe it as soon as it comes online, right? Like, done. Okay, she didn't need to. The security team was made aware via an email, and she's done. Right? No insurance, no, we don't have any reporting capability because we don't have any information in our laptops. It's all web pages. So, it's as simple as something like that versus, oh shoot, our, RMM gets compromised and now we got to call everyone their brother. Now we like, oh, well, now she knows to call the communication person, not a technical person. They're literally our front desk person. Start calling all these people. The phone thing is the third drawer down on your desk. Like,
But having those conversations means that people are prepared. So I had an MSP join me for an in-person event in Chicago, and she shared the story of an executive who'd lost their cell phone like 4 days before a cyber event. So in the middle of the event, the guy's like, "Oh yeah, I lost my phone recently." Didn't think to tell her. So Jeff, to your point, that CEO or whoever leaves their laptop, like if your customers understand what means incident and who to call and when to call, you start to create a culture where self-reporting is a thing, where people are like, "Oh yeah, I should probably let my IT department know that this thing happened that could eventually turn into something," versus, I can work off my phone or my tablet for the next 3 days. Like I'll get to it when I get back to the office. Well, you've got a device out in the wild. Who knows how locked down that was in the hotel.
Right.
So somebody just asked, what's the simplest IR plan? In the handout section, there on your screen, there are 2 IR plans in there for you right now. There's an IR checklist that's meant for you to use inside of your MSP. It's a very generic checklist, but it's a good starting point for a very simple internal. There's also now a much more robust version for you to use a template with your clients or customers. This is just a template. It is not meant to be a absolutely download this and use every single section of it. It's a starting point of a template. And Rob, to your point, it even maps out the roles in an incident response team, gives you definitions for each. And there's a section there, fill in the blank, who's responsible for these roles. And then once again, the team at Fifth Wall reviewed it and put in a section there on this insurance piece of it as well and what information you need in that. So there are 2 very simple versions. In that handout, they will also come in the follow-up email with the recording. They'll be available on the Fireside Chat webpage with the recording. But if you want early access now, they're in those handout sections. So let's see. There were a few things in Q&A that we've answered here, but I want to make sure that we cover a little bit too. Ben, great question. Are there clients that are too small to build out a formal IR plan? 1-person CPA, 2-person professional photographer company. Like, how small is too small?
I think even just a contact sheet and just something relatively formalized is better than nothing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it can be really simple.
Yep. The smaller the practice, the more simple. I mean, but you should have something.
Yeah, I answered the question too. Even if it's as simple as you have a printout outside of your electronic business information that says, "Here's my insurance agent, and here's their number, and here's my account." Like that's it. I mean, it doesn't need to be anything crazy. It's you. Who's responsible? Me. Here's insurance.
Here's the list of the banker and maybe my bank account numbers and who I need to call there to make sure if the email got compromised and some checking account numbers. I mean, simple stuff, but maybe something that would be nice to know if you're in the middle of an attack. So
even the smallest businesses, think if that doesn't exist and the owner, say it's a lifestyle business, the owner's on vacation, out of the country, can't be reached, and this happens, a staff of 5 or 6, he's going to come back to no business. And so it doesn't really matter the size. I think the guys have said it very well. Have a contact sheet. Who do you call in this certain scenario? Who are the players? Who's the poison control, right? We used to have this little green face on the telephones back in the day. If you grew up in the 70s and it was
Mr. Yuck.
Yeah, Mr. Yuck. He was the poison control person.
And 80s. Yeah, 70s and 80s were all old.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's great.
I would say too, just on that same thing is it's about, like what Douglas Adams says, don't panic. Your IR plan's your towel, right? For all the nerds on the call. It's about just not panicking. You know what to do. Even if it's very simple, it's just that, all right, let's just look at the plan so I don't forget something. I'm not going to freak out. Go down the list. Get it done, call the people that can help me, move on to the next step.
And testing the plan, right? Whether it's tabletop exercise
Test.
or just knocking the dust off of it every 6 months and make sure everyone understands, that will also reduce the panic.
I don't know how many of you actually have been through an incident. I've been through a couple. And what's funny is sometimes your customer is much larger than you and way crappier at this than you are. I mean, we had a customer that's a major international, I mean, they do like 10,000 orders a day on Amazon, huge company at our hosting operation. And I didn't know at the time that they thought that we were the source of the breach. They thought that first off, it wasn't a breach, but in their mind, it was. This was a hardware incident that they caused, but not going to get into that. Not going to point fingers. I'm just going to say the entire time it was a physical incident that management had assumed was a security incident because another person in a slightly disconnected part of the private equity firm that was above these entities was compromised. And we didn't have all that information. And what was very interesting was how they approached us in a very it came at us like this, but they were really thinking it was this, right? We had almost proved this negative. I can tell you that having our stuff in order and having EDR and SIM with logs was a very nice way to go. It wasn't us. Look elsewhere, and having your house in order in a case like that can defend you against your less mature, larger orgs that have way more cash and lawyers than you do. So that's another reason to just do it, because you don't want to get taken out by something stupid like that. So I know that that's not necessarily incident response planning, but it kind of is, because the fact that you have your house in order and then you can recognize that they don't have an incident response plan. They're just winging this thing, where they're very loose, right? Then you can kind of go, okay, well, luckily we know what to call, we know what to do in a situation like this. So just some thoughts, just being through some weird stuff.
No, that's a solid example. And Rob has one in the chat too, that the owner's in a major accident or illness and not available. It's business continuity. Having those contacts, knowing who to call next is part of business continuity.
One contact for any single thing. Yeah. You don't want single points of failure in any system.
There's a true story, real brief. Evolve partner back in the day, probably 7 years ago. Owner, single owner, MSP. The owner went scuba diving, had an medical emergency, passed away. Nothing was documented. It was a swarm approach from Evolve partners, et cetera, everyone coming from the community, as far as the peer community, to assist his wife and everyone else. That's a great example. It's not just being out of the country or being inaccessible on vacation. It's like an illness or, God forbid, worse. You got to have these things documented. It happens.
Yeah, that Evolve story is, you believe that's been almost 12 years ago now. Bill,
in 12 years, Becky? 12 years.
Yeah, so it happened right before I started in the industry.
Yeah, you were familiar with it then. Yep.
It's just making sure that this is documented. And again, an incident response plan is a great conversation point with your customers, a great reason to have that in place, to say, you don't always have to go to death and tornadoes, but sometimes it's smaller than that. But having these points and these conversations, you guys also talked about that trusted advisor, and we are at time. This always happens, but really, really making that trusted advisor status and making that a part of a conversation, so that it's not just the only time you're talking to your customers is at renewal or when they need you to buy, or when you need them to buy a new tool. It makes those conversations a lot easier if you're having these more robust conversations about planning together that don't cost them any money. Death and tornadoes, thanks. It's sometimes we have to reel this back into a bit more relatable. Gentlemen, thank you all so much for joining today. Audience, thank you for being a part of this with us today. We're at time, so I guess that'll be our parting thoughts for the day. Andrew's going to end us, but we're on a bit of a delay, so we get to do this fun thing where we talk for a minute until we wait for it to count down on us.
Gotta smile.
Here we go. 8. There we go. Thank you again, and we will see you next month for the Fireside Chat. And